This didn't frighten me right away. In fact, it didn't frighten me at all. It felt euphoric. It felt like relief. It felt amazing, actually. I stepped into the afterlife an atheist, and I returned a believer. And I'm here to tell you that the NDE is very, very real. So my name is Ray Catania, and Vivian, thank you so much for having me here today. It is both an honor and a pleasure to spend this day with you. To answer your question, my life before the NDE, well, I have to say that my childhood was not a particularly happy one, and it had a lot of trauma. And in my home, a lot of fighting and just things that I did not want to be subject to if I could avoid it. And so I would hide and in a small confined place where I could get away from it. And so being in these small confined places, back then, I didn't have a television yet, and there were no cell phones, there were no computers. So I really had nothing to do except stare at a wall, not wanting to be where I was. And eventually what I started to be able to see was the energy that makes up the wall. I could start looking past what was just in the physical realm, and I could start to see things that were in the non-physical realm. I didn't think anything of it at the time because I'm very young. This is single digits, 5, 6, 7 years of age. But that is going to come into play later when we actually get to my NDE, and that's about the age of 20 years old. The NDE, when it did occur, I was 20 years old and I was living in my home still with my parents. And my bedroom was located on the second floor, which was above the kitchen. And obviously in the kitchen, we had a stove. The stove was run by gas. And what had happened was, the way I understand it, is that there was a gas leak from the stove. And this gas was leaking and rising from the kitchen into my bedroom. So while I was sleeping all night long, I was breathing in this gas, but I didn't know it. So the morning came around and my mother went to turn the stove on to, I guess, make breakfast or whatever. And she turned it on, and right away there was a big blast of flames and the wall caught on fire. Now, even though there was a fire and smoke, it was neither of those things that affected me as much as it was the gas. So the fire trucks and policemen came to the home to answer the call. The way I understand it, my father put it out rather quickly. So the fire was out even after the police and fire department had arrived. However, I'm still upstairs sleeping. And I wake up because I hear this commotion. I hear the sirens and I hear the people, and I know something is happening downstairs that's serious, but I don't know what it is yet. So I try to get myself out of bed. And what I noticed was I could not move a good portion of my body. In other words, my legs were so heavy that I couldn't move them. And my head was so heavy, I couldn't get it off the pillow. So a couple of my body parts were working, so to speak, and one of them was my right arm. And I was able to pull myself to the edge of the bed, and I kept pulling little by little. I would only move a couple inches at a time because it's difficult to move when you're, only have an arm working. And I would pass out along the way. And then something would wake me up from downstairs again, maybe, some sort of commotion. So by the second or third time, I know if I don't get out of this bed that I'm going to die. I know something is very seriously wrong with me. I just don't know what it is yet. And I managed to pull myself to the very edge of the bed, and I tumble out of the bed and I hit the floor. and I hit it face first. Now, here's what's very, very interesting about this. The second I hit the floor, I knew I hit it, but I felt no pain at all. And I thought this was strange, but the reason is because that body was dead. And I was no longer in that body, but I was floating above it. And I was in a neutral corner of the room looking down on my lifeless body. This didn't frighten me right away. In fact, it didn't frighten me at all. It felt euphoric. It felt like relief. It felt amazing, actually. The colors were more vivid. Everything I was seeing was just more vibrant and alive, even though I'm looking at my dead body. And there is a light that comes from the adjacent corner of the room. And this is a huge white cone-shaped light, like a spotlight, that is shining only on me, not my dead body, my living energy that's floating above it. And as I proceed to go into the light, I'm apprehensive, and there's a being at the end of the light. Can't tell you who it is. I don't know. Male or female, I don't know. But the being says, it's okay, Ray. You can come into the light. It's okay. And so I felt comfortable, and I proceeded to go in further into the light. And the further I got, the more the euphoria increased. And the feelings, I just wish there was a word that could summarize it, but euphoric is the best word I can possibly think of. It was the most amazing feeling I've ever felt in my entire life. So needless to say, I wanted to continue into the light to the other side. But in that moment, I was looking down at myself, and my father had come running into the room. And this is when he finds me, and he scoops me up, and he's distraught. He's crying, and he's holding me, and he's screaming for the paramedics to come. And, you know, he and I really didn't have a great relationship, to say the least. In fact, I don't even remember how many times he hugged me, but maybe less than 5. And one of them was when I was dead. So I wanted that. I wanted that relationship with my father. I wanted it to be that way. So I thought if I went back that it would be. And I kind of started to ask the being if I could go back. And I was asking by saying, I can't leave him that way. It was almost like I was negotiating to go back. And the next thing I know, when I wake up, I am back in my body. I'm not in that room anymore. I'm on the living room floor, and the paramedics are now working on me diligently with all their tools and their equipment. And they're talking to one another, and they're like, we have to get the truck. We have to get the truck. They're talking about the ambulance. We have to get him in right away, meaning they have to take me to the hospital right away. And I'm like, I feel great. And I'm like, guys, listen, I feel fantastic. I've never felt better. Don't worry about me. I'm good. And they're like, you're not good. You don't realize it, but you are not good. And you have to come to the hospital. And I'm like, but did you see the light? Did you hear the voice? Wasn't that awesome? And now they're looking at me like I'm crazy or insane. I stepped into the afterlife an atheist, and I returned a believer. And I'm here to tell you that the NDE is very, very real. And I continue to live my life in a manner that was very self-destructive, because here I am, I'm 20 years old, and I don't fear death. So I proceed to put myself into some very precarious situations where I could die. I worked for criminals, and I was in an environment where people would shoot at each other, and I remember in one instance, I was hiding under the bar of this place, and the being tells me how to get out of the bar. It says side door, side door, side door. And I said, no, I can't go out the side door because the shooter's going to see me. And he says side door, side door, side door. So I said, what have I got to lose? So I go to the side door. I managed to get out. And then there's another long corridor I have to run down and go out another side door. And that leads me to my car. And I never, ever parked in that spot with the exception of that day. I don't know what made me park on that side of the building. Normally, I would have parked all the way on the other side and probably not have made it. So that in and of itself was very, very strange that I parked there. But what was really strange is this being is guiding me out of the situation. And this happens very often throughout my life. That's one occasion. I can recall another where I was younger and I was swimming in the ocean and I got pulled out to sea by the undertow. And I was very, very far out and I was trying to swim back in, but I couldn't. I would try to swim and the undertow would keep pushing me back. The lifeguard is not looking at me. He's faced the other way. I'm trying to get anyone's attention because I think I'm going to drown. In fact, they know I am. And no one's looking at me. Everyone else is already out of the water. I'm going down. And here's the being says, calm down, swim sideways, and take as long as you need to get to shore. And that's what I did. Now, how I would never have known to do this. Again, I'm very young, and I swam on an angle and I made it to shore. It took me a very long time, but I was very calm. And when you panic, that's when you die, because you panic and you don't know what to do and you start breathing. I was very relaxed. He made me very calm and just told me what to do, and I did it and I got to shore. So that's when I had to start coming to terms with the fact that there is something else. What it is, I don't really know just yet until I get all the way to meeting my second wife. But I do know that there is more to life after life. Those that are very religious, when they have an NDE, they sort of see it in the way that they were taught what is supposed to be this and what is supposed to be that according to religion. And listen, they may be right, but what I see from the combination of science and the NDE having a different perspective, I look for not I look for things outside the box. Now, I wouldn't say that God doesn't exist, but I would say that he is something different than the way religion is describing it, right? I would say that God is more of a collective consciousness, like Carl Jung described it, and that we are all connected to that entity. And even Jesus, who I believe walked the earth and was an amazing human being, told us God is within you and you are a part of God. So what he's saying is that exact fact, that we are a part of that entity and that entity is a part of us. What Jesus never, ever said was that he was the only son of God. In fact, he said we were all sons of God. So if we're all a part of the entity, then and the entity, if you wish to call it God or the universe or the collective, choose your word, we're all a part of it. And if we're all a part of it, we're all equal. There isn't one person that's above another person. We're all connected to that energetic entity, and we're all creators of the universe collectively. And that just makes more sense to me than one singular higher power making decisions on behalf of everyone. Because if that were the case, we could do away with a lot of the terrible things that are happening. And the reason we don't is because we're collective. We're collective consciousness. And some people are bad people, and they are a part of that collective consciousness. And until more people are good and less are bad, and the balance, the tipping point starts to go the other way, that entity doesn't know which way to go because it's made up of us. If we all come from one entity, and the best analogy that I've heard for why people do what they do, if you look at, this was from Eckhart Tolle, who said this. He was asked, why is there evil in the world if we all come from a place of love? And he explained it this way. Imagine that the sun is God, or the universal collective, that oneness, that love that we're all coming from. And the sun makes sure that everything on planet Earth continues to live by sending it energy. So that energy comes to the earth and it's turned into living things, and it keeps living things alive, right? However, when that energy enters another being, what that being chooses to do with that energy, you can't blame the sun for it. So if the sun is what makes me alive, but yet I do something negative with the energy I was given, it's not the sun's fault, it's my fault. I decided to do that with the energy because, like I explained, we are all creators. We are all part of the creation of this universe. We are all one with God. We are all one with the collective. So we're individuals in the sense that we accept this energy. It creates who we are and what we are, but then what we do with it is entirely up to us. If it is true that we get to choose the type of life that we're going to live, why would someone take one that's so challenging versus someone that would take one that's very easy? The difference is the person who takes the difficult one can become enlightened. The one who takes the easy one cannot and will not in that lifetime. It takes the trauma, it takes the negative things to happen to a person in order for them to be able to rise above them. My best days were my worst days. Those were the days that I shined. Those were the days that I showed my character. Those were the days that I proved that I can be a better person. The days those are the days that we can really measure a person by. Now, if everything came easy to me and everything was simplified and easy, I wouldn't be here with you today. You would have no interest in speaking with me. It's because of the transformation that I made, and others wish to make that transformation. And many people have experienced trauma. Many have experienced these horrific things. Mind you, it's not always that you do the horrific things. They could be done to you. Either way, you are involved in this traumatic experience, and we need to rise above that. And the way to do it is to experience it, become stronger, and move one step closer to enlightenment. Let's look at the Buddha again. He was a prince. He could have anything he wanted delivered right to him. His father said, who was the king, never leave the compound, never go on beyond the walls, because outside there it is terrible. And the Buddha said, well, if I don't get out there, I will never be enlightened, because you can't be enlightened if you only live half of a life, especially if it's the easy half. So he went beyond the walls. He left his parents, his wife and child even, to try to alleviate suffering for all people. And the way he needed to do it, the way he knew he had to do it, was to suffer. So he left with no money, no clothes, no food, no water, nothing. And no one knew who he was because no one had ever seen his face. No one knew he was a prince. So he was a homeless man for many, many, many years and endured that type of suffering and eventually became enlightened. I do not believe that ever would have happened had he stayed in his father's compound. And he also wouldn't have been able to teach people what he taught us. The way I understand it is even the worst of the worst people, when they return, they are shown their lives and they are shown what they did right and wrong. I do not think there is a good place and a bad place. I don't think there's a heaven and hell. I think that when you cross over, you see the things that you have done wrong and you become all knowing and you understand why you did those things. Immediately after the NDE, I still, I tried to speak about it, but because I could not get any sort of validation from anyone and everyone was continuing to tell me I was crazy, I chose to return to atheism. So it could have brought me out, but it didn't. And it didn't because I couldn't get validation. But what does happen is that I start to see the world differently. And what I mean by this is I remember at a couple of years after the NDE, I moved out and I got my first apartment. And I was living in this apartment and I thought it was going to be just wonderful because I was going to have parties all the time and my friends over. And, you know, it was just going to be an endless party. But that didn't happen ever. And the reason is because when I came home, this apartment would be filled with what felt like people to me. I didn't see them, but I felt like they were watching me. Like this room is filled with people. And it really scared me. It shook me to the core. And then things would start happening that I cannot explain to you. I would turn on the television and they would turn it off. They would change the channel. I would talk on the phone, and we had landlines in those days, and they would cut the call off. So they were just trying to get my attention. So I was a kid who could see energy, right? And I crossed over to the other side. They came back with me because they know I can see them. But I really can't. I feel them at this point. I'm not really able to communicate yet, but they're there and I can't sleep. And this is what drives me to alcohol and drugs, because I could not sleep unless I used alcohol and drugs to go to sleep. And so I think that my apartment is haunted, so to say. I kind of was starting to believe, right? So I move into my second apartment thinking I'm going to be free of that nonsense that was at the other apartment. And it's all the same in the next apartment. So it's not the apartments that are haunted, it's me. So that is when I had to start coming to terms with the fact that some of this stuff is real. But I'm very young. I'm in my 20s. And so I simply decide I'm not going to address this right now. I'm going to do as much drinking and as much drugs as I possibly can do to forget about it and put it away. And then that wake up call was when I had my own kids. And that's when I had to do away with the drugs and the alcohol. I need help. I need serious help. Just like I knew when I needed help with alcohol and drugs, I needed help for this, whatever type of insanity this was. And to top all of this off, if this isn't enough, my future wife, the woman I'm dating, the woman I love, who I now have to tell her I'm crazy, she is a doctor of psychology and a doctor of neuropsychology. That's what she does for a living. So I'm going to tell her that I'm insane. She's going to run for the hills. I'm never going to see her again, but at least I'll get the help I need, right? So I decide I'm going to tell her. I get my courage up and I do tell her. And she says, she does not give me the reaction I thought I would get at all. I figured she was going to say, call this doctor and never call me again. But instead, she says, that sounds like it's my dad. And I said, what? She says, well, I've been to mediums before, and my dad comes through a lot. And he comes through just like you said, like right here in front of your face. And he's very like powerful. And I was like, okay, but first of all, I don't even know what a medium is. So you're telling me I'm talking to dead people. That sounds crazy. And now I'm thinking I have to run because she's the one who's crazy and I got to get away from her. But I said, listen, it doesn't look like your dad. Your dad, I saw the picture that you have on the mantle. He's that's a thinner man, and he's shaved. He's clean shaven. This guy was stocky, and he had beard and mustache, and he had thick black hair. And she says, whoa, whoa, whoa. That picture is over 25 years old. That is not how he looked day to day. Let me show you what he looked like. And she went through her phone, and she gets a photo, and she shows it to me. And I said, you know him? It was the guy. Perfectly. It was him. And she said, that's my dad, silly. You're probably just a psychic medium now and you don't notice it. And I'm stunned in this moment. I'm grateful that I'm not insane, maybe, but I'm also not convinced. I never believed in psychics. I never believed in mediumship. I never believed in an afterlife. And all of a sudden, here comes all of this at me at one time. Overwhelming, to say the least. So she says, there's a medium that's coming into our city soon. She's very good. And she travels. She doesn't come here very often. Go and see her. I'll make the appointment. We'll go together and you can talk to her and tell her how you see things, and you can get validation. And that sounded like a great idea. So I did it. And I remember I met with her and we sat together and I explained how I see things. I told her about the movie screen and how it opens up. And I told her about the vibrations I get inside my body. And I told her about the energy that I can see moving about the room. And she said, that's exactly the way I see it too. And I was like, wow. So like, what are we? What does that mean? And she took me on as a mentee. She was my mentor for a year. And thank God she did, because I would have been lost. I would have been probably put away someplace because if you don't get this under control and learn how to deal with it, it can overrun your life. So luckily she was there for me. But a year later, after that, I get my second mentor, and this is how it happens. It's my birthday and we're going away on a trip for my birthday. And my wife is like, well, where do you want to go? And I said, I don't know, just someplace with trees. I want a lot of trees, a cabin in the woods, something like that. No beaches, no resorts, nothing like that. I just want a tree. I love trees now and I have no idea why. So we do that. And we spend the weekend meditating. And on the second day, she goes through her stuff and she goes, oh, I forgot to show you this. I meant to show you. One of the mediums I went to see drew a picture of my dad, and she shows me the picture he drew. And my heart just sank into my stomach, because not only was it the exact same guy, but he was wearing the exact same shirt that he had on in my premonition. So this medium and myself saw this man exactly the same way, wearing the same clothes, in the same everything. The beard, the mustache, the hair, the stockiness, the clothing, everything. So I was like, who is this guy? I've got to meet this guy. And we pulled him up. We did an internet search. We looked for his name, and right on the front page of his website, it says, now accepting applications for a 2-year mentorship program with Medium Joe. You must submit your application by February 15th. That is my birthday. So she says, are you going to apply? And I said, yes, I'm going to apply. And the application process was no joke. You apply and then you get another application and you apply again, and then you get another one and you apply again. He wants to know beyond any shadow of a doubt that you're real. And then you have to do an interview and there's other steps. So after a while, I just figured, well, I'm not getting in and I'm probably not real. And this is probably all nonsense and it's all in my head. And I'm back to thinking that the white light was the sun coming through the window because I'm doubting myself all over again. I would just like to say thank you to Life After Life for having me here today. And Vivian, I can't thank you enough for having me. It was an honor and a privilege, and I hope to do it again. So thank you, and thank you for watching.